this birthday celebration?
That's right. Well, the Lancaster's going to get Ebel first. He's going to do his display, and then a four-shipper of the fighters, which were the original Hurricane and 3 Mark 19 Spitfires that formed the BBMF memorial flight back in 1957. They're then going to put on a four-ship display, formation, and a tail chase, which will be absolutely fabulous.
Now, we were talking a little while ago, for those people who are watching, about how the BBF came to be, in the sense that they marked victory celebrations with aircraft that had taken part in the Second World War. But in 57 it all changed, didn't it? They decided to do something a bit more.
That's right. I think it was traditional to always put a Hurricane and a Spitfire over London to mark Queen's birthdays, etc. And they just went more formal just to make sure that this heritage wasn't lost and create this flight.
And it's rather grown like Topsy, hasn't it? Because it's expanded, and it just give us the figures now as to what you're actually either flying or will eventually fly.
Well, we've obviously got the Lancaster, and we have.
Taking off now.
That's it. Yeah, we have the Lancaster, we have a Dakota, and then on the fighter side of things, we have 5 Spitfires with one, so hopefully 6 Spitfires, and then 2 Hurricanes.
Let's just hear the sound as this aircraft lifts off. Now, she's a big machine, and we need to remember, don't we, that when they were taking off during the war with a bomb load on, even the takeoff must have been tricky, and quite often didn't happen, or there was a disaster.
Exactly right. They were absolutely loaded to the max, and I remember looking at and chatting to some of the old guys that had flown it, and there were times for the long range they could either fly full of fuel with maybe 2/3 bombs, or if they weren't going quite so far, more bombs and less fuel, but they were absolutely at max takeoff weight.
Well, with us on the ground, Kevin Wilson. We were talking to you a little while ago, Kevin. Stay with us, Parky, because we'll come back to you in a moment. Let's just talk about takeoffs and the actual difficulties before they even set off on the mission.
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, as a BBMF guy was just saying that the load was calculated to the pound in bombs and in fuel, and of course this was the most tense time of any raid, you could say. The actual takeoff, as the flight engineer closed his hand over the throttle that the pilot was holding open, and the pilot then held both hands on the control column and took off, and so many didn't actually make it. They ploughed in at the end of the runway, and then other crews, sometimes they would switch the runway, and other crews would then have to go back round the perimeter track and take off another runway, watching the pyre of this burning Lancaster to one side of them. It was a terrifying time.
I'm going to stop you because I can see on the runway the Hurricane's starting to move into position. So, Parky, let's talk a little bit about this aircraft. What's her pedigree?
Well, this one we had 2 Hurricanes, very rare. There's I think only 12 in the world. I now have 3.5 hours flying the Hurricane, so I'm not a huge expert, but it's a privilege to fly. It's heavy, it's hot, but you're just swamped with the noise and the smell and the charisma of the aircraft.
I wonder if we can, still looking at the Lancaster there as she circles, perhaps in a moment we can get a shot of we've got the Lanc coming back over, so let's just wait and watch her go. There she goes now. It's those Merlin engines, both of you. I mean, I must confess, as a boy going to air shows, it's that sound, isn't it?
It is. You can't beat it. It is the most fabulous soundtrack. It's so evocative. Yeah, absolutely beautiful.
And Kevin, and a reliable engine that sort of
absolutely, and would take a lot of damage. And of course, the thing about the Lancaster was that it could return from Germany on one engine, having come off the target at target height, where pilots normally put it into a dive anyway to clear the target. It would come back, and there are recorded instances of a Lancaster actually coming back to a forward airfield in Britain, just on one engine.
Well, let's have a look at this. I suppose at this height, round about the height that they would have gone through in the Dams raids, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's just watch this aircraft as she comes in for another low pass right over the tower here at Coningsby. She's actually got her bomb doors open as she comes. just hearing those engines running so sweetly reminds us of all the work that's been done. I think I got a figure this morning about £90,000 they've spent on this latest. It's not a refit exactly, but it is a complete. It's almost a rebuild, isn't it? It's down to the basics and back together.
Yeah, good old overhaul. Yeah, they've done an incredible amount of work, and it really was to the wire. She only came back late on Wednesday out of Coventry, so it's been close, but she's here and she's flying for us today.
What we could just talk about as she comes round again is her new colour scheme, Kevin. I'll get you to I'll wave my arms so we can hear those engines again as she comes over, but she is in a new colour scheme. What is it?
It is, she's painted in the colours of a particular aircraft, the Phantom of the Ruhr, which first of all flew with 100 Squadron at Waltham and then went to 550 Squadron at North Killingholme.
We're very lucky because actually, I'm looking around us here. We've actually got. We'll perhaps see them later on. 2 members of the original crew. This aircraft was a bit of a record holder, wasn't she?
Yes, I believe it was. I think it did 111,
121
operations, which that is a record because the average life of a Lancaster was about 5 operations. So to notch up so many was remarkable indeed. And I think there were 5 or 6 Lancasters did in fact go over 100 during the war, but very, very unusual.
But a very strong aircraft. I mean, they would come back in the most horrendous condition from the long-distance race they were doing over Europe.
That's right. It could take an awful lot of punishment, and as I say, because it had these wonderful engines to actually keep it aloft. But the main spar was very strong, and so long as you weren't on fire, then there was a very fair chance of coming back with great holes in the wings, in the tailplane, or whatever.
You can imagine, can't you, standing in the tower watching this very scene as an aircraft wheels down coming in, wondering if it was going to land safely.
Indeed, and I've got to say it's a beautiful sight. I know this is a war machine, but it is such a wonderful piece of British engineering, and it's lovely to hear that sound.
She goes into the distance there, and I don't know whether we can just grab a shot here. We've got Ron Clark was her skipper, 100 Squadron, based out at Grimsby. If we can get a shot of him there, he's pushing things, another member of his crew with him. We're hoping to talk to them later on. He, this morning, gave, or lent, I should say, his tunic jacket from all those years ago, 60, more than 60 years ago now, that he wore when he was actually flying that aircraft. I don't know whether can we see a shot of Ron watching? I don't know if we can. If we can, we'll bring it to you in just a moment. The pilot, Ed Straw, who's flying the Lanc today, is actually wearing that tunic as a tribute to Ron and to all those who are no longer with us, either because they lost their lives in the war or simply because their aircraft has actually outlived them, or at least this aircraft has, that is the extraordinary thing, Parky, isn't it? That something this old is still going strong.
That's right, and it's so easy to put them in a museum and let the dust settle, but to actually watch them in their natural environment flying, that's where they're meant to be, and it is an absolute privilege to see it flying again.
We can see, yes, and we've got a shot there. We are now. There is Ron Clark, and I've got a wonderful thing for him. Logo. We saw it on the nose a little earlier today. Look at the smile on his face, so you can see. I mean, there is a bond, isn't there, between these men and the machine?
There certainly is, and not all Lancasters did carry nose art, but a surprising number did. I mean, at one time it was thought only the Americans did this kind of thing, but no, there are a lot of crews who did ask their ground crews if they would put a particular piece of insignia on the nose, and this is a fascinating one. Phantom of the Ruhr. I think Ron Clark was saying earlier it was because he was a bit of an opera fan, and he wanted to name it Phantom of the Opera because that film was out at the time.
Right, there we go, Parky. The Hurricane